Hey everybody, I'm Nick Grice. I lead our Engage ministry, which is our outreach and our online ministry here at Real Life Church. Want to welcome you to our Real Life Moment. So this is a podcast presented by Real Life Church to offer you a quick moment of advice, inspiration, or just simply a conversation we'd love to share with you. So today I'm here with our interim pastor, Phil Thomas, and we're going to talk about our latest message series you've just started, Faith Check. So welcome, Phil. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, we're in our groove here of 2024, getting used to writing that on all of our documents. But just wanted to kind of mention and get you up to speed with what's happening and talk about this latest sermon series. So you began this new series called Faith Check. So why do you think it's important to look at our faith as we begin the start of a new year?
Well, the new year gives us an excuse, kind of a way to say, well, maybe I didn't do so good last year, so this year gives us an excuse, a new time to start a new habit, a new discipline, some way of just growing our faith, and that's what we're supposed to do. So James gives us a good insight into that.
Yeah. So we started this past week. You did session 1 and talked about perseverance.
Right.
So I thought that was a really neat start, because just to get in the right mind frame of this isn't going to be easy. No. There's going to be times where I want to quit or give up, but to persevere through that and to maintain that discipline, as you mentioned,
right,
to fight the good fight and to keep staying on track, right?
Right.
So
we do that in other areas of our life. We do it with our work life. We expect that same thing from our financial accounts. We expect the same thing from if we're involved with sports or any kind of thing we like to measure. Am I getting better? And we like to get better. That's a human thing. So why not apply that same thing to our faith?
Right. Makes total sense. So, and that's the thing. I love how Clint has put it before. He said, "Look, we're not striving for perfection,
right,
but we're striving for progress."
Right.
So we should be becoming more like Christ, but we're never going to become Christ.
No,
because none of us are ever going to be perfect.
Right.
But we should be enhancing,
right,
and producing more fruit within our faith.
Right.
So that's good.
Yeah,
I like that. How do you think the book of James helps us to do that? How do you think that encourages us to be better Christ followers?
I think James just does a really quick, compact way of listing some of the things that, hey, we say we're believers, we say we believe Jesus, we say we follow Him, then he kind of just gives us this checklist that says, if I believe this, then these are the things that I should be showing through actions. And he talks a lot about actions. He talks a lot about patience. He talks about perseverance. He talks about placing our trust in the right things and not misplacing our trust. And so he does a good job of doing it without making it like a list of rules. It's just, hey, these are ways that a Christ follower should exemplify his love. If we say we believe it, our lives should show that.
Right. And that's the neat thing about our faith, is it's not a checklist. It's not we have to achieve all these certain standards and then we've arrived there.
Right. It's not a to-do list.
Right.
It's, I got to do this and I got to do this and check things off. It's, am I really showing Christ's love in how I treat others? And am I showing my faith through my actions?
Yeah.
Just simple ways of taking Jesus' love into the world, not by a checklist, but just by my actions and how I conduct myself.
Right. So that's what Wendy and I were talking about on our intro this past week, as we kind of go into the book of James in this series. It's kind of like a self-assessment.
Right.
And it's not a pass-fail. It's not, I'm not doing this, so I'm a failure as a Christ follower. But hey, as I assess my faith and look at those things that I'm working to achieve to be more like Christ, what areas could I maybe put some more emphasis or focus on in this new year? So I hope that's what the listeners and our attendees and those of you who are participating in this sermon series get out of that. So it's not a series or series of messages to make you feel like, oh, I'm not measuring up, So, man, I guess I just need to quit.
Right.
It's just, hey, let's do better, because Christ doesn't expect perfection.
No.
But like we mentioned, let's make some progress in the new year. And we talked about that for accountability. We mentioned that with small groups and things like that. Those are practical ways that the book of James points us to help with that accountability that all of us need.
Right.
Whatever those disciplines are. We talked about, some of us, I put a challenge out at the end of December, like, hey, let's read through the Bible in a year.
Right.
Like that's an attainable, achievable goal. But what tends to happen is we start that, and you maybe get into 4 or 5 days of it, and then I slipped off, I missed a couple days, and then you just fall out of that habit. So without that accountability there, it's really hard to self-discipline, and then you feel like a failure, and then you're like, oh, I'll just do that next year.
Right.
But Christ says, no, that doesn't mean you failed. It means pick yourself back up, and let's pick up where we left off, and let's keep going. So those are ways I want to encourage folks. Like, hey, if you stumble and you feel like you're failing, you're not a failure. You just need to pick yourself up from where you are and proceed forth.
Right. I like the word you used, just improving. We just we want to improve in everything else that we do. Let's just improve in our faith. I like that.
Yeah, and I think like if you look at it from a graphic standpoint, if you're a visual person, Clint's talked about this. Like our faith journey can look like that, but it ought to be kind of going like that.
Trending
right?
up.
We're trending up.
Right.
Not toward, like I said, we're not going to be perfect, but we should be making progress in our faith, because if we're stagnant, then there's a passage I'm not great, but Paul talks about, you're still immature. You're on infant formula, and you should be eating solid food by now.
Right, yeah.
So we don't want to stay in those immature stages of our faith, but be working towards maturity.
Right.
That's a long journey. It's a long process.
Right.
And that's okay if it takes some of us longer to get there than others. But let's work together towards that. So what's the difference, you think, between constantly changing to be more like Jesus and following this list of rules we mentioned?
Well, like we touched on that James doesn't give it's not like in a to-do list form. It's in, okay, I say that I'm a Christian. That doesn't exempt me from suffering. It doesn't exempt me from going through some trials. And through those, God is allowing me to be tested, and then I grow through that process. And so it is a constant changing. Instead of, okay, I've done that, I had a test and I passed it or I failed it. It's more of, hey, I went through that and I feel stronger in my faith. I grew some, and that's in that part of that process where you say we're trending up, we're improving. But of course, we're not always going to stay on that up. Sometimes we're going to have some down times, and he said we should expect that. Yeah. As believers, we're not exempt to suffering, and we should exude patience and put our trust in the right things. And I think James does a good job of showing that. So it is a process of change. It's a process of growth, but not a checklist. Right.
Okay, so just real quick, we're heading into week 2 of this thing.
Right.
This is going to be a 5-session series. What are some of the things to look ahead to? Not to give it away. It's not a spoiler. But what kind of things can we anticipate discussing through the rest of the book of James?
Okay, like this week we're going to talk about our faith should push us to action. We're going to talk about having patience and endurance through suffering, and the fact that James highlights the fact that our lives don't last very long, and we have a short time to reach others for Jesus. So we need to grow in our faith so that we can draw people to Him. And then he also talks about the wisdom of putting our trust in God and God alone, and not putting it in our bank account or our jobs or things that don't last.
Right.
So those are the things we'll touch on each week.
I'm looking forward to that. I hope all of you are. Really appreciate you, Phil, and just the practical messages you're bringing us and teaching us how to put our faith into action, because that's what we're called to do. Because faith without works is dead.
Right.
And we talked about that, and we talked about like taking some of those steps along our faith journey And God's not punishing us when we don't do those things, but what I always say is, hey, if you're not doing that, man, you're missing out.
Yeah.
You're really missing out, because God has more in store for you, for your faith journey, than just going through those mundane steps. Man, our faith should be something that gets us excited.
Right, exactly.
And the joy of Jesus should be exuberant and evident in our life, and that's just part of the fruits of the Spirit.
Right.
So as we experience those things, and yes, we go through those trials and those struggles, but our hope is in Christ, and we fix our eyes on eternity, because like you mentioned, the things of this earth, they're fleeting. We're but a vapor. You know, a vapor is here one minute and it's gone the next. So in comparison to eternity, our lives are very significant here on earth, but in comparison to eternity, you're talking about a small speck.
Right.
So very important what we do, but if we keep our eyes fixed on eternity, it gives us that broader perspective of what God wants us to do. So I hope that's encouraging to you. I look forward to learning more the next several weeks as we continue and wrap up the book of James. 5 chapters, 5 sessions, 5 sermons. Stick with us through the next several weeks, and we're going to learn just as what the things that Phil mentioned on how we grow in our faith. Such a practical book. I really enjoy the book of James. Look forward to what we're going to learn together. So I just want to thank each of you for joining us today. Thank you, Phil, for filling in the gap and leading us through this time of transition and teaching us what it's like to be a better follower of Christ, to grow in our faith. So thank you again for joining us. If you want to learn more about our church, more about if you want to connect with us or submit questions or prayer requests, you can always do that by going to our website, discoverreallife.net. Thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you on our next episode.
Thank you for letting me do it. I'm having a blast doing it.
Good stuff.